Arlington, Texas history is rich and varied. The stories of prominent people who worked to make Arlington the vibrant place that it is today lives on in the spirit of the community. These stories are vital to our understanding of Arlington. However, there's much more to learn from Arlington stories not often told or partially forgotten. There are two places in Arlington that memorialize examples of just such stories: the Witness Tree Memorial Garden and the Baraka Home Cemetery. Until the early 1990s, when driving down South Cooper Street, we would see a 60-foot tall post oak tree with broad leaves blowing in the breeze. It was known as the Witness Tree. In the late 19th century, surveyors used the tree as a place to view the landscape in the early days of Arlington's development. Later, it was a prominent meeting place on the Barden Farm, where friends and family would gather for social and religious purposes. The tree stood in the area for over 150 years before its life was tragically cut short, when it was uprooted for transport to make room for a Kmart parking lot. Most post oaks typically live about 250 years, so this uprooting really was in the prime of the Witness Tree's life. Part of the Witness Tree was preserved, and its trunk now sits in a memorial garden located on Barton Road. One unusual feature of the park is a plaque dedicated to Stormy Dawn Jones, a local girl who was the world's first recipient of a simultaneous heart and liver transplant. Like the tree, Stormy's life was also tragically short. She died several years after the surgery from complications related to rejection of the heart. These two figures, the Witness Tree and Stormy Jones, reveal the connections between the history of environment and the history of girls and women in Arlington.
If you're going to sell the family farm, it's fortunate when the farm happens to front a new interstate highway passing through one of the fastest growing suburban communities in Texas. My old friend Bill Barden was happy to sell what was left of the Barden farm for a new Kmart shopping center, but he couldn't bear the thought of the Witness Tree on the property being flattened by bulldozers. It was, he said, a deal breaker, and yet the tree really was in the way. So Bill cut a deal with the developer. They'd uproot the tree and replant it on the property edge. Now, trusting sort that Bill was not, he also made a side deal. If the tree died, the developer would kick in $50,000 to fund a little pocket park. Now, it was a big tree, though not as old as some believed. They uprooted it and moved it to a new site. I watched them plant it from a distance because the oak had a big hollow in it containing a really angry honeybee hive. Now, I'm no tree expert, but I figured the tree was doomed. The root ball they included just wasn't big enough. The canopy was too large. There was too much damage. The tree was already showing sort of decline from old age. And sure enough, the tree withered, and in a few months it died. I was there when they cut it down. That's when I realized that Bill Barden really was sentimental about that oak. Tears were running down his cheeks. They left only a 12-foot stump. Bill, though, got his $50,000, and then he began making the little park, including a stand for the stump. I'd drive by, and he'd be working on the park. He did most of the work himself. When it looked like the big stump might rot, Bill coated it with linseed oil, which promptly turned the tree black, like it had been burned. Now, I personally counted the tree rings after it was cut. It was actually closer to 170 years old than 250, which had made it just old enough to witness a new Texas republic. It's a good little park that Bill crafted, a fitting memorial for a semi-historic tree, and also in the memory of little transplant pioneer Stormy Jones, who Bill had met earlier, and he was very impressed with her. Arlington at the time was becoming less focused on pure economic development. The idea that protecting trees and requiring landscaping all need to be part of the big picture. The Witness Tree was not the biggest thing in this process, but its demise came up repeatedly. It still does. You never want to lose a giant tree like that, but in many ways, the Witness Tree's demise has been the gift that just keeps on giving.
The Baraka home was a rescue home for unwed mothers at a time when pregnancy outside of marriage resulted in many girls and women being sent from their families and into poverty and danger. Over the course of its history, the Baraka home housed thousands of women and infants, giving them the opportunity to make a new life for themselves. The cemetery contains the graves of a few women and Baraka staff, but mostly infants who died of various causes, notably a measles epidemic and the Spanish flu.
I grew up in the neighborhood around the Baraka home. At the time, we did not know what it was really used for. I grew up with a bunch of kids over in the Varsity Circle neighborhood, and when somebody would break into the home over there, the old building, we would go over and run through it and see what was in it. We thought it was haunted. We really didn't have any idea what the home was actually for because it was not in operation when we were growing up. The Baraka home was different from many other rescue homes at the time because their mission was to allow the women to keep their children. Many homes for unwed mothers separated the mothers and the child, adopting the infants out to married couples. The name Baraka Industrial was really appropriate because the home refers to the industrial skills that were taught to the mothers on site. They had an education and an occupation when they left, and their job skills they picked up would help them to care for their babies. The early example of Arlington's investment in education and providing opportunities for women lived on in the legacy of many notable Arlington women.
Some of these notable women include Elaine Sutherland, Rosemary Gould, and Billy Farah, the first woman realtors in Arlington. Helen Maddox was the founder of the women's division of the Arlington Chamber of Commerce. Martha Walker was the first woman city council person. And finally, we can't forget the legendary dance studio owner and instructor, Persis Forrester. These women contributed a great deal to Arlington, and their ability to flourish here is part of a long history of Arlington's support of women in business, politics, and social life that began at the Baraka home.